So thank you all for coming today. We're super excited to have you all here. My name is Haley Quinn, and I, along with Alicia Lewis, the Associate Director of the Women's Community Center, will be moderating tonight's conversation with Oakland City Council member Carroll Fife. So just to give a brief overview of the format of today's conversation, Alicia and I have prepared questions to kick us off, and then we'll open up the conversation for the last 15 to 20 minutes for questions from you all. So when it's time for questions at the end, we ask that you all use the Q&A feature to submit your questions, or if you prefer to ask your questions aloud, you can do so by using the raise hand feature. Also, please note that we'll try to get to as many audience questions as possible, though our time is limited today. But we do invite you all to post your reactions or messages of support in the chat as we go along. But don't use the chat to post any questions, just so that we can be sure that we don't miss any of you all's questions. Also note that we do have closed captioning available tonight, and you can enable that at the bottom of the Zoom screen. But with that all said, thank you all for being here with us in conversation again, and we are super excited to start. So I'll pass it off to Alicia.
Hi, y'all. Just want to echo Haley's sentiments. Thank you for being here. We want to thank Oakland City Council member Carroll Fife for being with us today. We so appreciate it. And we wanted to start off today with a land acknowledgement. So we have spent the past year with our students, staff, and faculty spread across the globe, and we recognize that from wherever we are, the reality of colonized and stolen lands is pervasive. In recognition of the widespread impact of colonization, we offer this land acknowledgement as a grounding to honor the original inhabitants of the lands where we engage in this work. While we are not currently in the physical WCC space, we acknowledge that the Fire Truck House and Stanford University sits on the unceded and ancestral land of the Muwekma Ohlone tribe. This land was and continues to be of great meaning and importance to the Ohlone peoples. We recognize this with humility and a commitment to education, awareness, justice, and honoring their sacred land. We invite you to join us in acknowledging the land that you are currently occupying and recognize that we all benefit from the injustices perpetrated on Indigenous peoples. You can go to https://native-land.ca as a starting point. Whether you are on campus in the Bay Area or wherever you are temporarily or long-term, we encourage you to research the original peoples and give honor to their ancestral land. In solidarity, the WCC staff.
Thanks for that acknowledgement, Alicia. So now without further ado, I'd love to introduce you all to our phenomenal guest speaker for today, Oakland City Council member Carroll Fife. Thank you so much for joining us today, Carroll. We're really excited to have you. For those who may be unfamiliar with Carroll's work, she has dedicated decades of her life to public service as a nonprofit director, active community organizer, and co-founder of the Moms for Housing movement. In July 2020, 6 months after organizing a takeover of a vacant home for houseless and housing insecure mothers, Councilmember Fife was called to continue her decades-long service by running for Oakland City Council. On the City Council, Councilmember Fife continues advocating for housing equity, divestment from the police to invest in the community, essential workers' rights, environmental justice, economic justice for the Black community, and so much more. So at this moment in time, I will pass it off to Councilmember Fife to start us off by just sharing a little bit about what her journey to activism looks like and how she's come to be in the position she's in today.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that introduction, and thank you for having me. I just want to say that you all putting this together is huge, and I appreciate the fact that you all are organizing from where you are. I think that's important for all of us to do, like folks used to say, is put your buckets down where you are and do the work. So everything is so valid and so important, especially right now that we're living in times where people want to see something different, something radically different than what exists and radically different from the status quo. So I guess I'll get into what got me here. Sometimes I don't know. Sometimes I feel like it's like a tornado or a wind blew me into this position because I never expected or planned to be an elected official. I never planned to run for office. A lot of people asked me to and have been asking me to for the last 10 years, but I'm just like, ugh, elected office. Like, then I'll be a part of the system and I'm trying to dismantle the system. So gross. But I think it has to go back to my childhood where I was indoctrinated into a very right wing, um, ideologically conservative mindset. I went to a Christian school for the first 10 of my 14-year education. So from 4 years old to 14 years old, I was in a private school for Baptists, and it was predominantly white. And so from a very young age, I was forced to see the contradictions of what love and justice look like when it is opposed to Black skin, if that makes sense. So I was always, every day was church. And it was like the Reagan era where, all of the white people around me were it was in Michigan, and everybody was very, you know, very conservative, and always talking about how, we need to walk in Christ's footsteps and love our enemies and be like Jesus. But they were always like using racial slurs and talking about just like it was the anger and the evil was palpable. So I grew up confused about what does it mean to be walking in God's love and have so much hate. And then it's something that we didn't talk about in my household. My mom and dad never talked about it. I never shared some of the racism that I was experiencing at school, so it kind of just went undiscussed. And then as my first political action was walking out of school during the Rodney King beatings, when everyone in my high school was like, "What?" And when there was no verdict, there was no guilty verdict. That was my first act of civil disobedience. And then a few years after that high school experience, I moved to California, and I got introduced to like political theory and Black historians, and ideas of they came before Columbus, things I never heard about before. And I was like, whoa, I want to know more about this. And I started reading Dr. Frances Cress Welsing and some of her psychological underpinnings of white supremacy and why that is such a thing. And it just brought me to this journey of wanting to change those systems so that other kids don't go through what I went through as a young person, but also so that people have access to all of the beauty that I did have access to, with my parent, having two parents raising me and investing in me in a certain kind of way. So it's layers of things, but I got super politicized in California, and really started wanting to make a difference when I got here, and started doing some grassroots work.
Thank you so much, Carol. And what a difference you've made. Just got to give mad props.
I'm trying.
Hey.
That's what we can do.
So our first question, we were watching the Moms of Magnolia Street documentary last week, the YouTube 4-part series put out by NBC Bay Area. And in watching that, it really just illuminated that a really critical role that you played in this effort was bringing people together. I think you spoke to hearing the same conversation in a lot of different places and just really wanting to synthesize this conversation into one space.
Right.
And so understanding that coalition building, it's so crucial to organize across identity groups and to really center an intersectional lens in our work. Could you share a little bit about what your approach to organizing towards a common goal is?
Yeah, I think it's really important to identify what people's core issues are. And people know because they're living their lives in a way where they're often impacted by things, but don't necessarily have the language or the just the education, because our education system is created in the way that it is to keep knowledge away from people, especially the knowledge of changing the conditions. So bringing people together to say, you know what, your situation is not unlike this situation, which is not unlike this situation, but with the goal of we're stronger together. And the only way we're going to make real systemic change is if we are organizing collectively and collaboratively around an agenda. And I think what we saw in the documentary was like me identifying the individuals who came to me and said, Carol, do you know anybody with some space? I'm looking for an affordable place to live. And every single time I got more and more dejected when I was like, how much do you make? No, there's nothing for you. Um, and the final straw for me was when like a sister, she used to come into my job like regularly, like sometimes, 2 or 3 times a week to, warm up her food in the microwave or, get change for me for the bus or whatever. But she was an elder. She was an elder. And, my comms director came in and said, hey, did you hear what happened to sis? And I was like, no, what's going on? I just saw her a couple days ago. And she was like, no, she tried to commit suicide because she didn't have a place to stay. And so she ended up in the hospital because she knew that if she tried to take her life, she would have access to either a final resting place or at least a bed for the night. And that just blew me away. So I was just like, man, she could be my mother or my auntie because, she's been out on the street so long, but she looked like my relatives. And so I was like, it just brought me back to all the other women who I was just like, I'll keep looking or I'll check my networks and see if I can find somebody. But then I was just like, you know what? Let me call. Hey, can you meet me at my office? I got an idea. And so I called everybody that reached out to me, all the different moms, and was like, if you trust me in this process and if you're willing to organize, then I'll make sure that you have a place to stay at the end of this process. And so I brought because I've been organizing in Oakland for over 20 years, and I have a broad network of folks that this couldn't have happened without my network. So you saw me bringing people together, but what you didn't see is that unseen network of other organizers and activists who provided security, who provided legal assistance, who provided fundraising assistance and put that whole thing together. You didn't see that part. That's something that I've never talked about or never even discussed until Moms for Housing, because we were kind of put in the spotlight. But it is about all of us working together to create that movement energy to transform things. And I really believe that that's what it's going to take. Each one bringing somebody else into the fold to say, let's get some shit done. And I don't know.
Go for it. Be yourself,
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. I really had a moment in watching. I think before going live, we were talking behind the scenes about how Cat Brooks was part of the series last year. And, to see Cat Brooks in the documentary, it just really drove home like the grassroots movement is so intertwined. There's such connectivity here. So Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. But just one of those, I was just like, hey sis, I'm in LA, but I got to do this press conference. Can you go through and hold it down for me? She was like, for sure. Like, okay, thank you.
Love it.
So referring back to Moms of Magnolia Street, on the first night occupying the Magnolia Street house, you described that there was an anxious feeling in the air because you were all constantly looking out the windows waiting for police to come. And I think that moment resonated because it was very real and authentic, but it also spoke to the personal sacrifices that are necessary to make in order to achieve the goal at hand, whether that be your personal safety or your mental well-being. And so we're just curious to know how you have determined your threshold for personal sacrifice in the pursuit of or the desire for action and change.
My personal threshold is like a little bit of obliviousness, a little bit of recklessness, and just a deep belief in justice, I think. And I say that because you have to throw like caution away to some degree to challenge institutional systems. because they are bigger, they are stronger, they have more resources. And so you have to, when you're going up against those systems, you got to calculate like, okay, how far am I willing to go? And, it takes some kind of irrationality to be able to contend with these systems that have challenged our ancestors, right? Challenged people that I think are much better than me, much stronger than me. But understanding that the conditions exist such that we don't have any other choice, right? So for my personal threshold, I believe sacrifice is how you lead. So I honestly have not mastered being able to regulate in that way. And it may be good, it may not be good, but I just try to give it all. I try to put it all on the line for what I believe in. So I wouldn't recommend that for everybody. I look at my daughter, who's also a young organizer in Oakland. She's doing a reparations campaign right now for Black students in Oakland Unified School District. And I'm just like, no, take a break. Like, no, you don't have to get on that conference call. You don't have to call all these people. You don't have to go to this school board member's house this week. Like, pace yourself. And she's like, no. And I'm like, oh, wait, I programmed that. I did that. And so I hope that the next generations are better than me, honestly, because there is a balance to be had here. And this is a marathon, it's not a sprint. And we've had many victories, and we want to continue to have more victories, but you do that by caring for yourself.
Absolutely. Thank you for that.
Thank you. That was a beautiful segue into our next question. So maybe there's room for some elaboration, and just it kind of takes a different turn. But the events of the past year have left many feeling hopeless. And so we're just wondering what advice you can share about self-care. In particular, I think I keep referencing the documentary, but it really just drove home like how little space there was for rest, seemingly. We see you giving an interview, and then you get this call like, we got to go right now because the police are at the Magnolia Street house. Kat Brooks talks about, I was sick in bed when I got this call. And so, how do you think about self-care in these moments that are so heightened? And I can also repeat this question if it's helpful, but what advice do you also have about moving through hopelessness and continuing the fight toward liberation?
One of the ways I look at it is that I think about my grandmothers. I didn't know my maternal grandmother. She passed away. And my mother always tells me, like, it's because she did what you're doing. Not in the social justice way, but just gave of herself till she was empty. And she ended up having a stroke and passing away from a stroke. And so she was like, you don't have to walk in her shoes. You don't have to do all of the things for all of the people. Mm-hmm. And you need to rest, Carol. Sometimes you need to sit down before I come out there. And I'm like, oh, I don't want my mama to come get me. So I do have to, I have to remember that, like, we don't have to carry all of the things they did. So much has opened up for us as a result of what even domestics did. Like the women who don't have names or faces or are not in history books, they all sacrificed for us to be where we are. So it does them a disservice to take on the burdens of the struggles of the past. But at the same time, I also think like, but they did shoulder so much. So who am I to be like, oh, I can't do this right now? So I struggle, once again, I struggle with how much should I do in terms of our liberation, because even though, so many women, so many people, freedom fighters ahead of us, and the unnamed, unromantic, unsexy folks who came before us, they did a lot. There's so many of us that are still in the same positions, that were are in the exact same positions of the folks who came before us. We have our systems of education are just as problematic as they were before segregation. Our home ownership levels have plummeted to pre-2008 levels. Our healthcare, our access to healthcare, our graduation rates are, there's so many indicators that show that we're not that further along not that much. And so that makes me be like, yeah, rest is good, but so much to do. But I think that's also ego, right? We got to keep our egos in check, because there's nothing that I'm going to do as an individual to change the situation for all of us. It's all of our work, and many hands make light work. And so as an organizer, I try to go out and get many more hands to do this work so that we can all rest a little bit more. And I think that's the key, is getting more people organized and into movement spaces so that we don't have to shoulder all the responsibility. So it's a lot of ego checking internally, and having the courage to face yourself and be like, who do you think you are? You're not a superwoman. You shouldn't be striving to be. You should be just doing what you can. And that looks different for everybody. Everybody's threshold is different. And so in terms of self-care, and you know what, Alicia, yes, please repeat the question, because I want to make sure that I'm precise with my response.
I appreciate that. You're doing beautifully. So the events of the past year have left many feeling hopeless. What advice can you share about self-care, moving through hopelessness, and continuing the fight toward liberation?
I think it's generationally, it's different. And I also, as an introvert, as I am, I'm actually relishing in the isolation of COVID. I'm recognizing that the cliche, every cloud has a silver lining, has relevance, because it's caused me as an introvert to be in my space, in my little apartment, giving me the time to think. I rarely have that. I never had that before COVID. I was always moving from event to event, from interview to whatever, you name it. But I never had the chance to be still. And so it's crazy, because even though I am not religious anymore as I used to be growing up, having this Christian foundation, when I'm in those spaces, all the indoctrination comes back. And I give thanks for that, because I learned a lot that has stayed with me and has helped guide me in this organizing process. Because in these times, I can be still and hear God. I can hear what she sounds like, and I can hear her telling me like what the next step should be. So when one of the verses that comes up for me is, be still and know that I'm God. And so COVID has created that stillness, that slowness, that in a typical capitalist society that has you moving in this rat race, you don't often get. I have it. And I hope people cherish those still times. And I believe that when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change, right? It's quantum physics. And so when you look at it as problematic, or you look at it as painful, then you create more of that. When you take the time and say like, wait, I have time to be silent. I have time to be still. I have time to be alone. And that is precious. And I'm going to use it. And I'm going to grow from it and learn from it. I think that allows us to be grateful. And I think being grateful is so important. And I'm so grateful for the opportunities to let my mind relax. And because I think in peace times and still times, that's when genius, and that's when the creator, and that's when the ancestors speak to us in our spirits and our minds about what we should be doing. So we're not just reacting to the phenomena in our environment, but we're actually being stilled so we can think, okay, I'm going to meditate right now and try to get clarity on all of this madness and chaos, because you can't have peace and chaos in the same space. You have to create the space to do that. And that's what this time has shown us. And so I can look back and say, okay, it was nuts in 2020. And I didn't think 2021 could be like contend with 2020. And then there was a coup, an attempted coup at the Capitol. Yeah. I'm like, oh my goodness, it was like December 45th, 2020. And I'm like, this is crazy. 2021 is like going ham. So, but there was some space that I took to start to plot out what 2021 would look like. And I'm grateful for that. So living in a space and state of gratitude, even for some of the hardest things. And I've experienced some things that I couldn't even share with you all right now. But then I also give thanks for what those things have taught me, because that builds the strength for the next fight. So I think gratitude is key.
You got me out here levitating. I felt that in my soul. Preach. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I definitely resonate with that. And it spoke to me, just being able to take that time to be still. I think I've also been using this time a lot to do that and to reflect. So I appreciate your answer there. But you did mention also that bringing more people into the movement could help possibly distribute some of that workload, so that you do not have so much pressure on yourself, and other activists don't have as much pressure to do a lot of that work. And I find that maybe for some people, taking that first step into activism can feel overwhelming and intimidating, so it's hard to bring them into the fold. So I'm just curious to know, what have you found to be some of the most useful tools in helping you turn your thoughts into action in regards to your activism?
One of the things that brought me in early was just a study group, and anybody can do it. You get a group of friends together and read an article or read a book, and then talk about it. And you once you start talking about those things, like, okay, well, what do you want to do about it? Like, this is wild. And I watch young people do this, and it's effective, because then you just start making a plan, like, we should talk to somebody about this, even if it's like, I've seen young people say, we shouldn't have to endure this type of racist curriculum in our class. What do you think about it? Yeah, what do you think about it? Well, yeah, let's go talk to the principal and tell him we don't want to, we want this lesson plan changed. And they talk to the principal, they talk to the teacher, and it happens. I think it doesn't have to be this huge, we're going to go take over a bridge or steal a house. Um, just baby steps. I think talking with like-minded people, or even like people that you don't necessarily agree with, and just having those conversations is a critical first step. And there's lots of ways, if you want to move up to more, you know, um, radical activity. And I say radical, not like crazy radical, because it's often used as a pejorative by folks on the right. But radical meaning change making, difference making, transformation, status quo breaking, is what I mean when I say radical. Just baby steps are fine. And if you want to take bigger steps, come holler at me. Come to Oakland.
Love it. Come to Oakland.
That's right.
Thank you. So this is our last question for you before we open it up to folks in the audience to ask any questions. So, you've had quite a career, and so you've now been elected to Oakland City Council. Congratulations.
Or condolences.
Jokes.
Thank you. Thank you.
So we're curious, what is the most important leadership lesson you've learned throughout your career, and how has it proven invaluable in your activism?
That's really hard. That's really hard. The most valuable?
Or one that's up there.
One that's up there? I think just authenticity, like knowing what your purpose is. And that's hard sometimes, but I know why I'm here. And I love The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. I don't know if anybody's read it. It's like my thing. And there's this repetitive theme throughout the book, that when you aspire to your personal legend, or when you live your purpose, the whole universe will conspire with you to achieve it. Mm-hmm. So when you know what you're here for and what you are striving to do, and every breath you take is about living that purpose, then the universe will open up. I've seen it in ways that I couldn't believe. And like I said, I'm not religious, but I'm like, wait, do I need to say thank you, Jesus? Because how did that just happen? How did we engage in an action of civil disobedience to highlight the housing crisis in Oakland and throughout California? And people told us, You can't do that. You will never get that house. That is illegal. You are wrong. It doesn't matter how bad the crisis is. To me, picking out paint colors and tile for the building, and then people saying, hey, I got a house, I can just give you the house, right? So it's just like moving from one thing. And it takes me back to like, faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. So when you have that courage to believe and know, despite all of the things, whatever people are saying, whatever chatter, death threats that we got, it doesn't matter. If you are living your purpose and on your mission, then the universe will conspire with you to help you achieve that mission. I fully believe that. So my leadership lesson is to listen to that voice. They say well-behaved women rarely make history. Don't listen to it. Don't believe it. But honor that voice and know that what you're fighting for and believe in is worth pushing for. And so, what is leadership but service, right? But serving something bigger than you. So that's my lesson, I guess. It's just like finding that thing that is bigger than you and believing that you have everything that you need to make it a reality. And being authentic in that journey and in that push has, brought me to where I am. And hopefully I'll be able to continue to do more. I just want to make a little bit of difference for a few people. And I think I'm doing that.
For sure. Yes. I just want to say thank you again so much. Everything you've said has been so heartening and life-giving, and I feel very grateful to be in conversation with you. Thank you.
And I hope it doesn't stop here. And you all give me encouragement, just the light that you bring and that you're organizing these events and this series to me is like, when I'm getting tired, I can be like, yeah, it's folks gonna pick it up. It's other people that are gonna be well prepared for the next step. So I'm grateful. Once again, I'm grateful for this moment. I'm grateful to be here. I'm grateful that you put this together. And I look forward to the change making that you all will continue to do in our journey for just collective liberation.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. All right. Thank you so much again. Yeah. With that said, we have a couple of questions coming in. So for those of you who are here, please feel free to post your questions in the chat or in the Q&A, and we will get those answered. Should we give a couple of minutes, Alicia, or do you want to just dive right in?
Maybe dive in just for a time, and then we can just, as they come in, read them off.
All right, cool. So someone asked, how do you balance connecting to people who don't share your vision while not compromising on the goals that you have?
It's funny because I run into a lot of people who do not share my vision. And I just try to have conversations with them about equity, because no one necessarily wants to disagree that equity is like a good thing to have. And so when you have conversations with folks about the way things are and the origins of why they are, it makes those conversations a lot easier. Our miseducation system and our media, honestly, there's a lot of programming for people to believe and come to where they believe and create these entrenched perspectives that folks have. So it's a lot of unpacking. So patience and really digging into the fact that everyone deserves to live dignified lives, but because of structural inequities they can't. Is a place where I often start when people disagree. And then usually, especially with white dudes, I find it with white dudes a lot. It often comes to like, well, would you trade places with me? With you in your position as a white man, would you trade places with me and be a Black woman?
Right.
Yeah, yes or no. And it's you without fail, like, well, no. Like, well, why not? Let's unpack that. Like, why not? And so I try to get people to think about their positions of privilege and even my positions of privilege, because it exists, and try to break that down and unpack it. But yeah, I usually base my conversations in equity and just plan to have a lot of patience.
Yeah. Awesome. Great. Thank you.
I really love that strategy because it's just so simple.
Yeah.
It's not a lot of like jargon or theorizing. It's just like, let's just keep it. Would you change places? That's really beautiful. Thank you. So our next question is from Faith Casme. Got to give a shout out, director of the Women's Community Center. Let's go.
Faith.
And Faith said, thank you so much. This has been amazing. My questions, can you please share more about your experience as a city council member? And also, what advice do you have for people hoping to make change from within the system?
I think I've been in city council now for 10 weeks. So I'm still very, very new. And people know that I'm coming to dismantle systems and extract as much benefit for people who don't have a seat at the table, or when they are at the table, it's a whole ploy to not have them have power. And so it's been challenging for me. I mean, just with very basic systems like, do I have an email address? Do I have a phone number? Or am I going to get paid at all? No, not for a month. Okay, this is interesting. So just the system's not working for me. It's been a challenge. And then just understanding that people often want to keep things the same. And it's not always because they're malicious or don't agree. It's because change is difficult. So being in city council is hard, but I'm always, once again, I ask a lot of curious questions. I try not to highlight my agenda per se. I try to just ask a lot of questions to show people like, this is not okay. This is not okay. And I'm going to ask you questions that help you understand why it's not okay. So once again, centering equity, because everyone wants to engage in equitable processes, or at least appear to be. That's helped me get a lot of things done from the inside, even pushing elected officials who tend to be more conservative. The mainstream Democratic electeds who want to look like they're doing progressive things, but are really not because they're neoliberals. Me being my authentic self, pushing for equity, pushing for justice, makes them want to show up different because they can't look like they're in opposition to me. So being authentic, centering all of my work on equity, and really through an equity, like we have a Department of Race and Equity in the city of Oakland. And so running things through an equity analysis helps. Like, I'm like, why are you doing that? Did you run that through this mechanism to find out if your project, your proposal, your ordinance, whatever, pass muster for the Department of Race and Equity's tool? And if not, they're like, oh, I should have done that. And then it shakes out. It works. So it's a challenge, but it's well worth it. It's well worth it.
Awesome. Thank you. So Gabriella asks, I would love to hear you speak more about how you chose to run for an elected position. I know that running for office is a contentious topic among organizers. As you mentioned, can we really use the institution to dismantle itself? At the same time, also, as you said, the institutions have all the resources and our people need those resources now. I'd love to hear some of your thoughts on this.
Yeah, that's a great question. And they do have all of the resources, but we have all the people. And you will hear me like a broken record say that the power is always with the people. And that's why I won. It was a tough decision for me to even decide to run, because there were like 3 other people that I was trying to get to run so I wouldn't have to. And they all declined. So I'm like, man, I've run campaigns before. I managed campaigns, and I just did not want to get in that. But I knew that the person sitting in the seat was doing such a job at really undermining everything that I stood for, that I had to. And because it was another Black woman, it just broke my heart. I didn't want to do that. But all skin is not kin. And because she was reflecting really detrimental policies that had an impact on people that I care about, and the systems and the environment that I care about, I really didn't feel like I had a choice. So there were a lot of people that were like, Carroll, if you don't do it, Oakland is going to be gentrified in the next in the next 4-year election cycle, because my district is the heart of the city. It's our downtown area. It's our Lake Mare area. It's the Jack London Square. It's where all of the hotels and all of the high rises are being constructed. And so the incumbent was in such league with developers that she was just selling off the city piece by piece in conjunction with the existing establishment. And so I really didn't have a choice. And I don't believe that you can dismantle the master's house with the master's tools, but I do believe you can go in there and get some rakes, some knives, some hammers, some wood to construct something outside of that system. And that's what I'm there to do. I'm there to say, okay, this is how you resource this. This is how they are going to block you here. This is what we need externally. Because what we've also done, what I'm also a part of, is building self-determined systems and networks outside of the city. That's what I've been doing for the last 25 years. So I know that it can be done because I've done it and I'm doing it and in the process of doing it. And so now being in the seat allows me to figure out how to resource what's happening on the outside, and not necessarily financial resources, but just like knowledge about how these systems work and how to dismantle it from the inside. Because we sometimes, in order to create, you have to dismantle. And if there are things that are salvageable, we can do that too. But right now, there's so many things that need to be reworked. And I think this it's a place to do that. And I'm encouraging other people who are like-minded, who also want to run for office. I'm teaching them what I've done so that they can replicate it and do it even better.
Thank you so much, Carol. I love the metaphor about grabbing rakes and knives and things along the way.
I don't know.
I think it's very relatable, like I think we all find ourselves in positions where we're working within a system and an establishment, and having that questioning about like, what does it mean to be here within this system, and can we affect real change? And so I really appreciate the thoughtful response that you just gave. It really resonates.
Well, everywhere we all find ourselves in places of oppression, all of us, different levels, different degrees, but there's always something that you can take. Like our ancestors who used to work in the big house would grind up glass and put it in the food, right? Because that's what they had at their disposal. So we got to figure out what can we grind up to make these systems and the gears grind to a halt so we can create something new. Everywhere we are, every single one of us can figure that out if we put a little thought into it. And now is the time. More than ever, I feel like something is opening up in the universe where it feels like everything is breaking. But that's the time of regeneration. When forests burn, that's when you can get a whole new regeneration of life. And we're in that time right now. So I would hope that people don't despair, but understand that at the eye of the storm, where there's calm is where you create. So let's all be creative, because we can build something beautiful right now.
Absolutely. Thank you. Haley and I generated some questions, and so there's like one more that we didn't plan to ask, but if more folks have questions in the audience in the meantime, please send those in and we'll be sure to ask them. But one of the questions we were curious about is, how do you cope with failures or disappointment along the way? Inevitably there are going to be setbacks, and advancing justice or seeing like any real outcome is oftentimes decades in the making. And so how do you kind of hold yourself in moments where things don't go the way that you were hoping for, and maybe what's in front of you is really something that feels deeply heartbreaking in the moment?
I think one of the things we don't allow ourselves to do as much as we should in this culture is to grieve, and to be vulnerable and open to grief and expressing that and being okay with that. I think it's important to have those feelings and emote, but give yourself time to do that. And then then circle back and be like, be grateful for those experiences of failure, because in those lessons, there are opportunities for what to do next time, or how, how to learn and grow and get stronger. Like most of my organizing career has been failures. And I'm so thankful for that, because that's how you build character. Those are the weights that you're lifting to get stronger for the next fight. So I give thanks for failures. Those are just lessons and opportunities, for free classes. Like, I have a lot of student loan debt for taking some classes and going to school, and don't have anything to show for it. But I have a lot to show for the lessons that I've learned and the mistakes that I've made organizing. So yeah, to just give thanks for those. Allow yourself time to grieve. Allow yourself a network of folks that you can grieve with. Um, so you're not feeling it alone and in isolation. And then giving thanks for the opportunity to learn a lesson that you can put into practice for the next fight.
Thank you so much. You really are such a poetic speaker.
Right.
It's so weird. I don't know what this is. I don't know where this is coming from, but I hope it helps.
For sure.
I know I'm taking a lot away from it. I think other folks are too.
So we have a few more minutes left if anyone has any lingering questions that they want to ask. Something I'm curious about is if you've already seen or that you anticipate seeing some bureaucratic obstacles arising during your role on the city council, and how you hope to navigate those so that you can actually make the change that you're hoping to see during your term.
Baby, yeah. Oh yes, it's happening. It's so sad. I what happens, and one of my teachers used to say, and he used to do presentations like before they replace before they replace you, before you're eliminated as an effective organizer or activist or whatever, your opposition creates your surrogate, right? So we saw that with, oh, am I going to get in trouble? Sometimes I talk too much. We saw it with Malcolm, when they assassinated Malcolm. It was just brought to my attention recently that the agent who participated in getting rid of Malcolm's security force, his security detail, wrote a letter on his deathbed telling, everyone who would listen that, it was one of the worst decisions he made in his life. And he created this plot to blow up the Statue of Liberty, and blamed it on my brother's father. And so everybody thought that this whole thing was, it's this radical group of Black folks that are terrorists and want to blow up the Statue of Liberty. But it really was the FBI that was involved with local police departments who put this together. And so, they had to get rid of Malcolm, but before they got rid of Malcolm, they had to install another leader. And I'm not going to get into who that is, but he's still with us right now. And they did the same thing with Martin Luther King by uplifting Jesse Jackson. And they did the same thing with Chairman Fred Hampton Sr. And it's so funny because all of the people that they installed, all the folks that were installed by our government at that time, are still living and still with us and still leading today. So I see my opposition lifting up leadership that sounds like me. It's really close, but is also not going to push for change. And oftentimes those leaders look like it's almost indistinguishable. But there's the key difference is that I'm not manipulatable in the same way. And so I'm seeing those bureaucratic installations and building up of individuals who walk the walk and talk the talk, but don't have the backbone or the courage to challenge existing systems. So it's always concerning. But you got to keep doing the work. So yeah, I see the different ways, and then trying to out organize the things that we're doing. It is what it is. It's par for the course, and it's happened once again to people throughout history, and it doesn't stop the work that needs to be done. You just got to do it better, and you got to do it stronger and harder, and that's what I intend on doing. But oh yeah, it's been happening. They tried to do it before I even got in office, all of these different slurs and trying to control me through shame with the mailers that went out when I was running. Like, did you know that Carol Fife was evicted from her home? Did you know Carol Fife was in 11 lawsuits? Is that the type of leader? I'm not, I'm impervious to shame. So bring it. And I hope all of us are, because if you live in the shadows, you will always be controlled by them. So I walk in the light and I'm very clear about my failures. I'm very clear about my inadequacies and my imperfections, because I won't let that control me. And so that's why it's always so critical to be authentic and speak and say the same thing to one person that you'll say to another. And that provides safety and security. And it is what it is. But yeah, they're playing games. They've done it to like stronger, better people. So I expect that they will do it to me, because I'm trying to change some stuff. So bring it on.
I just want to lift up, I'm impervious to shame, so bring it. I walk in the light. Put it on a t-shirt. Loved it.
Oh my goodness.
So I think we have time for one last question. We have a question from someone watching. What has been bringing you joy lately?
I'm retraining myself in playing the flute. I played in 5th, 6th, and 7th grade. So I'm trying to recall that. And so I've learned to play Mask Off, and that's fun. And I enjoy painting and having debates with my 16-year-old who's brilliant. Just listening to her and watching her grow and seeing this fierce activist that she's becoming is just like the light of my life. My grandson, I have a 1-year-old grandson, which is amazing. So just the little things, like a freshly made bed, like what? A bath bomb? Hello? Like a nice cup of peppermint tea? Love it. And watching YouTube and watching like silly dog and cat videos. I love the little things. It brings me an immense amount of joy. And naps. I'm taking a lot of those these days. Want to try. So those things bring me joy. And then spaces like this where I can talk to people who get it and who understand like what I'm doing and what I'm trying to do. That brings me immense joy as well.
Thank you so much. Will Mask Off the Flute version be on YouTube?
No, ma'am. No, we're not doing that. No.
Real. Keep it in house.
Yeah, keep it in house.
Well, Haley, I'll let you say your words as well, but I just want to say thank you so much, Carol. This has been a deep joy. I'm so happy we recorded it, because I feel like there are so many nuggets of wisdom in here that can just be watched and watched again, and we can take different things each time. So thank you. You are a light in this world. I'm so honored to have had this time with you, and thank you so much for all that you're doing for the community.
Same. Thank you.
I'll just second all of that. This has been such an enjoyable experience. I've learned so much, and I'm definitely going to be watching this recording again. I think you've definitely helped just reaffirm some of the things that I needed to hear in my own activism journey. And I hope that that's the same for a lot of the people here. And I also just want to plug the last session that we'll have for the Collective Liberation series. It's joyful somatic breathing. We'll be doing some grief work, helping us acknowledge and process our grief through some somatic breathing exercises. So be on the lookout for that. And yeah, you're getting some thank yous in the chat. So yeah, thank you so much for being here again.
Thank you. And then shoot me the link for the somatic breathing. Breathing is life. Breath is life. So I definitely, hopefully I have the time in my schedule, but if it's recorded, I can come back and watch it.
Yes.
And definitely we'll be sharing this as well. You all are also a light, and all of us together, oh my goodness, we're going to brighten up this world. I'm excited. Right? Thank you. Thank you for allowing me the space and the time.
Thank you. We will definitely send you the link for somatic breathing. Thank you. And we wish you the best. We'll be rooting for you.
Yes.
I need it. Stay in touch too. I want to know what's going on. Let's stay in touch.
Absolutely. We would love to.
All right, y'all.
Alrighty.
Take care.
All right. Be well.
You too.